All right, we're live. This is Jose Galison on No Way Jose with the Liberty Movement YouTube channel. Today I have with me Andrew Doughty. He's a friend I made on the internet. You know, he's one of those friends I made along the way. All I know, he could be my own personal fed, but we get along pretty well. So we've always kind of gone along
very well.
with when it comes to like books and stuff. So today we're going to be bringing to you a literature episode. And another thing I kind of want to bring into is being as this is a liberty movement, me and Andrew have a pretty different politics, and he's probably more of a constitution. If I could assume your position, I'm more of a radical ANCAP, you know, non-voting anarchist, whatever you want to call it. Point of the liberty movement, and you know, that's kind of why it's good to throw out the political sometimes. I mean, we have those discussions, but you know. That's about. But yeah, with that, we're gonna go ahead and get into it. We decided we were gonna pick 5 books each, and books that were like that influenced our thinking in some way, shape, or form. I think you may find that I tend to lean towards nonfiction. Andrew tends to lean towards fiction, so there'll be kind of cool contrast there. See where we're at, and depending on time, we have our top 3, but depending on time, we might get. See. With that, Andrew, you want to introduce yourself, or was it what I did good enough there?
I think that was pretty good, actually. Yeah, I think you covered it. I'm definitely more of a constitutionalist, monarchist. So, in regards to liberty, that's kind of where I stand on that. So, which we've had our discussions, and like I said, I always enjoy talking with you just about random things, even whether it's, you know, politics or just, I know I'll usually tag you in like Heinlein quotes or whatever else I'm looking at the day, or some funny meme. So, but it's good to be here.
Still haven't gone around to touching Heinlein. I know that's almost a sin to not have gone there yet, but one of these days. I haven't even watched the movie Starship Troopers. I just share the memes occasionally.
Well,
yeah.
Well,
I mean, I know the fans don't like it.
The book. Yes.
Yeah.
So read the
everyone
book
always
before you
suggests
watch
read the book
the movie.
Very rarely do you ever suggest.
Well,
does anyone ever suggest the opposite?
The guy that made the movie, Paul Verhoeven, made it as a satire of fascism, but he didn't really. You could tell as you're watching it, he doesn't really understand what fascism is.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny whenever you look at it in that light.
Most people just see fascism as those things that I don't like. And that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think, yeah. Oh, one thing I want to mention too, not to let the cat out of the bag, but one thing we kind of talked about before is one thing with this channel is we kind of wanted to have hosts and different shows. And you've kind of kicked around the idea of maybe doing a literature episode or a literature show, something along the lines, maybe hosting it here. So, I mean, just throwing it out there. So if anyone is interested, you know, maybe drop a comment and let them know, you know, throw them yeah, dope. I mean, most liberty-minded folks are down. Yeah. So with that, you want to go ahead and get into your first book, and then I'll do mine.
Yeah. Well, the first one, I'm sure you won't be surprised. Yeah. You kind of cut out for a second, but you're introduced to the first one, right? First book. You there? Hello. All right. So first book, Jose says he's fixing whatever the issue is. So the first book is Lord of the Rings, which I'm sure Jose is not surprised about that. We've discussed it multiple times. As far as how it's influenced me, I mean, I got into science fiction and fantasy at a young age, and The Lord of the Rings always stuck out because it's just this great story for those of you that have never read it, or I'm sure most of you have seen the movies. It's a really good story about just good versus evil, and light versus darkness, and about how even small decisions can make a huge difference and how things work out in the future. And Tolkien, the author, he can be very wordy. I think that's partly because he was paid by the word a lot of times. That's how they used to do things with writers. But let me check. But he understands some facets of human nature that are very, very minute, I guess you can say. Very, very hard to understand. I don't know why that is. But it's always something interesting to me whenever I read it, because like one of his quotes from there, one of the things he says is that, that it's good does not conquer evil by these great like bounds and leaps. You back?
I'm back. My computer is something weird. Hopefully I don't do that again.
Wow.
We'll just roll with it. I mean, whatever.
Were you able to hear anything I was saying? I was just kind of talking.
Sorry. Did you go ahead and start getting into it?
I started kind of getting into it. My first book, which I'm sure you're not surprised about this, is Lord of the Rings.
Oh, actually, I'm a little surprised. I didn't know you. I mean, I knew you liked it, but I'm kind of surprised you went that route. But go for it.
Well, it is like I was saying, I've always been a sci-fi and fantasy nerd, I guess you can say, but something about the Lord of the Rings, and Tolkien especially, always stuck out with me, because he's this guy that just, he believes in, that good doesn't triumph over evil, and these great leaps, I guess would be the right word, but in small little pieces of everyday life. It's not these great grand decisions or grand schemes that really make the difference. It's whenever little people choose to affect their small everyday life in their world, rather than trying to change. Like, I'm a teacher, and I was teaching my students in English, and I was like, well, look, we actually use that quote as an example. It's like, quit trying to affect the things that are just outside of the realm of, like you won't be able to change the whole country, not at once, but you can change your home. You can change, eventually change your town and your friends and all that, and just kind of build that up so that people kind of start seeing things differently. And that's always something that spoke out to me, I guess, is that, it's not about these great grand things. It's about this little bit. Jordan Peterson, I think, kind of is on the same thing. He said, quit trying to change the world, or if you try to change the world, start by making your bed. So
yeah, there is always the emphasis, obviously, in the hobbits and stuff, but yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Sorry.
And that right there. And then you also have, this, one of the things that I think you see in Aragorn, who is, this great guy who's like, whenever you picture like what a person should be, they're honorable, they're noble, they're brave, they're all these different characteristics. You picture him, and whenever you see that, you even see like whenever he became king, he didn't want to be. That's never what he wanted. He didn't feel like he was worthy to do it. He didn't feel like, that he deserved it. He just felt like, that's out of my wheelhouse. I'm content with where I'm at being a ranger. But he ended up doing what was necessary, doing what was right, I guess you can say, doing all these great things. And he did that, though, out of a place of, this isn't what I want, but I know it's what needs to happen. So, and I think that is one of those things that, as the saying goes, those who really should have power are the ones who don't really want it. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of falls back on that. So, but Lord of the Rings, it's great. Like I said earlier, Tolkien's very wordy, and there were times I'll never forget reading one part of it where it was just like, is he really spending a whole chapter talking about the side of this road Frodo and Sam are walking on? You know,
Dude, I read
but
Silmarillion,
whenever
so
you,
trust me, I get it.
yeah, and that's worse than Lord of the Rings.
Mm.
So, but it's still like Tolkien has just this great. If you're really looking for like good versus evil, light versus dark, that's my go-to right there. It's like this is what you want. You want Lord of the Rings. You just might need to definitely read at a college level to really understand it.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I was reading as a little kid, but I mean, I just like I don't know, just something about it I just devoured. I mean, I most of my Lord of the Rings knowledge is from when I was like 10, 11, 12. But like because I was just devouring it. My username for most things was Fingolfin for the longest time because he was the first one who slayed a Balrog. But yeah, so definitely
you shall not pass. But it's I think I read mine in junior high the first time, and it was still kind of like I said, it was just wordy for me. And I mean, I loved it. The movies is what got me hooked into it, but I had already started reading other sci-fi and fantasy. It's a family thing. We grew up doing it. We're all a bunch of nerds.
It's funny. I actually didn't really care for the trilogy, but I loved The Hobbit and I loved The Silmarillion, which is weird because they're kind of like they're like complete opposites. And it's like I feel like the trilogy is kind of like in between because like I feel like The Hobbit's more lighthearted and fun. And then the Silmarillion is like super serious. It's like a mix between a history book and like a Bible. But but like and then like the Lord of the Rings is somewhere in the middle of the trilogy. But for some reason, I don't know. Yeah.
After reading the Lord of the Rings, I tried to read the similar, and I still have it around here somewhere. All my books are packed up for the most part, and I was like, I can't do this, you know. But I should probably go back and read it. But
it's fun. I know. There's just like I like the world building, the lore, like because there's just so much to it. Apparently, I don't know. I mean, I'm talking on my ass. This stuff I remember from when I was a little kid, but I'm pretty sure him and his sister developed a whole separate language when they were kids. And like they did all sorts of crazy stuff. Like he also most people don't realize all of the languages and different dialects within those languages in the Lord of the Rings. He completely created. Like he was he
built. You know, I saw this. It was a meme the other day, and it was talking about like authors' world building, and it was it had this basically. It had something about someone. I can't remember who it was. It might have been George R.R. Martin. And then it had it was George R.R. Martin, how he basically just stole his ideas from something, and it had J.K. Rowling, how like she had built this whole world and then she retconned it as she went through the books, went back and changed everything. And then it was based Tolkien, with the red eyes, and it was like build a whole world, like dark world filled with evil and good and battles, and like this just terrible, tragic and backstory. And then it's like all just to write a children's book, and it just kind of made me laugh. It was like,
it's ridiculous. But he had backstory within backstory within backstory.
Dude, the lore I love the Lord of the Rings, but one of my friends is so deep into the lore, and he'll post stuff, and I'm just like, good God, like that was really interesting. But you really love the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, it's a rabbit hole for sure. Let's move on to mine, just because I mean we could go on to that for forever, because like I'm a pretty big nerd there. Here's my first pick. Went from fiction to nonfiction. Anatomy of the State, Murray Rothbard. Just a quick little pamphlet, but this is not to get too in the political realm, but because this influences my thinking. This is what put me over the edge from minarchist to anarchist. Because in my conversation yesterday, I talked to Keith Knight, and that was one thing we brought up, that like that seems to be for a lot of people in their intellectual journey. That's a spot where they stick forever, and that's a spot where it stuck for me too. And it's in some ways it's kind of dry, but really the biggest thing is it completely breaks down just why it's not tenable and how everything's just going to eventually fall apart. And I mean, I guess it's kind of bleak in that ways. I mean, they go along to like the Supreme Court and like stuff like that, and there's a lot of cool stuff that he goes into. And I mean, I guess you're going to be kind of a little bit autistic for it to be your thing, but it definitely is an interesting read. But it's a weird, I don't know, it has a special spot in my heart for me. I mean, for most probably wouldn't care for it, but it's definitely,
Does it kind of hit on that quote? I can't remember if it was Thomas Jefferson or whoever, which one of the founding fathers said. It might have been Hamilton, but it sounds, whenever you say like he discusses how it always ends in, I guess tyranny would be the correct word. It always, every time someone says that, I always think of that quote of how the tree of liberty has to be refreshed with the blood of patriots.
Yeah.
Does it hit on that?
I mean, it's been a while since I've read it. I don't really feel like he goes into it that I recall. It's a short pamphlet. I highly suggest reading. It's a short read. So I think I read it in a few days. But it's I don't think they go too deep into that. I mean, he would probably dispute you. I mean, like his thinking would be more like, yeah, maybe, but it's like you're just doing this constant cycle. You know what I mean? It's just going to always break down anyways. I mean, yeah. But with that, I mean, I don't have a whole lot to go into that one. I don't know if you want to move on to yours.
You can do another one if you want. I feel like I talked for like 20 minutes. So.
Oh no, you're good. We'll just go back and forth, back and forth. I mean, whatever. You're the guest anyway, so
right.
It's your chance to show
out. My second one is Starship Troopers. By Heinlein, and I know we've talked probably more than a little bit about this. Medium bit, I'll say, but it's one of the things that has always stuck out to me is Heinlein's philosophy in general has always been on point, in my opinion. He's just, especially whenever you really look in regards to like the specific quote I'm thinking of is whenever he's talking about force. And he's, like whenever you use a vote, you're applying force. And a lot of people don't really understand that any power, any authority is always backed by a physical force. And I think that that's key to really understanding anything. And I think that's part of the issue that our society doesn't really understand, but that he really grasps. Now, Starship Troopers puts all of these ideas into a really cool universe. Specifically, like it talks about meritocracy, and that's really something that I think is key, again, that I think we've really gotten away from in general. But within that universe, it really just points it out, puts it all like on display, I guess you can say, where like you have these guys that are, they're working and they're doing the worst jobs possible. For in some occasions, that might be fighting in a war, or it might be being a trash man, or being, dealing with the sewage, and they've got to do that for a set amount of time. And then once they do that, they actually gain their some of their rights to vote and do other things. Specific rights. Everybody's guaranteed some rights, but then some are guaranteed by earning your citizenship. You get very specific rights that are more than what everyone else has who hasn't earned them. What's really interesting about it, really, what I love is the spacesuits, though, because it's like this amazing, like top of the line, just futuristic, like they're flying around like the Mandalorian, except it's full body suits and nothing can hurt them really. And one of the ways it's really different from the movie is actually they don't see like the bug aliens until the end of the book. So, but it really jumps around a lot. It's really affected my thinking, I guess, and my philosophy, my lifestyle in general about, like, am I earning these things? Am I really taking the time to putting into working and doing what I need to do, to really earn, not necessarily earn the rights that I have, but to earn I would say to earn the lifestyle, and that goes with anything, whether it's reading or, training or physical fitness, is like, I want to be the best human I can, if that makes sense. So, and that's kind of how I look at it, is I have to work towards that. So,
correct me if I'm wrong, but in Starship Troopers, in that world, were they able to opt out? Because I feel like I vaguely remember that being a thing. Like, I knew it was like you did service of some sort and you earned rights back. But it was I thought there was like you could opt out, but then you just don't get the it was almost like the state provided benefits in that in there. You know what I mean?
And
maybe I'm wrong. But you could opt out.
If you decide to do the citizenship, like if you decide to become a citizen, you had access to like certain loans and all that, that were kind of like, I don't want to say subsidized, it's not the right word, but you had access to different things that weren't always there. I don't know if you could completely opt out, but like they did not require like the same responsibilities of normal people as they did of citizens. They expected citizens not only to, they expected them to step up if necessary. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know.
So,
I have a vague idea. I for some reason I was under the impression that they had the option to opt out, but then you just don't get the benefits of the state, kind of deal.
I mean,
right?
I
Whatever
don't
those
think
in that
you
world.
had any benefits, any major benefits if you, but I mean, Heinlein didn't go into as far as like the world building. He didn't do a lot there. So I don't, that's something that I need to, I guess, research a little bit more because that sounds familiar. Like they didn't have to pay taxes or something, which would be great.
Yeah, because I mean, in that situation, even
But,
I, as an anarchist, that would, in a sense, be kind of anarchy because it's like if you can opt out, it's like, okay, this is a voluntary organization that if I want to be a part of, I mean, you could. It's almost like you had the option to opt out, or you could be part of it, or you could even go further and have even extra benefits if you completed a service.
Yeah,
like that's. But I mean, I could be wrong. I haven't read the book, so that's why I was asking you.
It's been probably about 3 years since I read the book. So I would probably need to reread it just to double check that. But that sounds familiar, but I might be wrong.
Yeah.
So it would not surprise me if Heinlein had that in there. And the reason why is because several of his main characters in other books they're anarchists, and they have that philosophy, the no, all government will result in tyranny, and and if you're forcing anyone to do anything, that is tyranny.
Yeah,
so,
non-aggression principle.
Yeah, exactly. So whenever you have that, I don't exactly. He didn't really go all into the world building with that one. He's no Tolkien, so. But he definitely had you can see the fruits of those ideas sprinkled in there, I guess you can say.
I wanted to touch on real quick, because I've heard the quote before that you're talking about how that basically every vote or a vote is violence or whatever. And I kind of wanted to touch on that. That's kind of like, say, for example, with what we're doing with the Liberty Movement, like what I would say if you're part of this movement is if you can admit that it's violence or it's evil. But my thing is, but we can have our disputes on whether it's necessary or not. Because I can get with somebody who can agree with me that every government action in general is somehow backed up by violence. But now, if you can't even admit that, then that's an issue. Like it's like you're just lying to yourself.
I think that's the issue that a lot of people don't understand, and that's why, like, I mean, at the end of the day, speeding tickets are enforced by violence. You have to realize that any authority has to be enforced with the power. It has to have the power to enforce it, and that means not only morally but physically. And so, physical force is violence. And I mean, I think that's a common misconception. And again, that goes back to, I think our society is so removed a lot of times from physical violence in their everyday lives that they don't grasp that's why it's such a shock when something happens and they don't understand, like, hey, like anything. So, I mean, and honestly, if you really want to drive the point home, all you got to do is say, hey, and it doesn't matter which side of the political spectrum they're on, just ask them, well, do you not feel like someone forced you into an option you didn't like the past 2 elections?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that drives the point home. It's force. A vote is force. So, and I agree. I think as long as you can come to that understanding, we can talk about all day about it,
Yeah, because I don't even feel like you're even being intellectually honest if you can't at least admit that. So that's kind of like, we don't really have anything to talk about.
You're either being dishonest or just absolutely ignorant. You can't comprehend how force works, which either way, if If you're dishonest, okay, we can have a discussion. If you're just that stupid, then we can't have a discussion, but for different reasons.
I mean, we can, but it's like it's almost like you got to go so basic with it where it's like I don't really want to waste my time.
Exactly.
All right, moving on to the next one.
Explain to my.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. We'll move on to the next one.
No, that's good.
Oh, you're good. You're good. This is a little bit of a cheat, but this one's 2 books. But anyone who knows these books will understand why. It's New Libertarian Manifesto and then Agorist Primer, both by Sam Konkin. The reason why I included both is because it was his only works. And they're both very short, and they're kind of the entirety of his philosophy, and it's of agorism. One little thing I do want to go into is if you do decide to buy this book, see, I have 2 of them. I have this one, and then I have this one. Get this one. This says it's also got the additional agorist class theory, which I just got today, actually. And I made the mistake of getting the other one because you can't get agorist class theory by itself. But because I might be a little wrong, I'm talking out my ass, but there's a guy named Wally Conger, and I think he compiled some of Konkin's notes from what was to be like other book or something, and he kind of completed his work to make Agorist Class Primer, which you're not able to get by itself, so you have to get as part of the New Libertarian Manifesto, but there's one version that has it and one that doesn't. So I ended up buying both. So I mean, whatever. If anyone wants the other New Libertarian Manifesto, I'll give it to you because I have an extra one now. But that's this goes into both of them go into. If you're going to read it, start with New Libertarian Manifesto. That was his first one. And then the second one's Agorist Class, or not Agorist Class Primer, but it's fucking an Agorist Primer. And this goes over the philosophy of agorism. He was of the impression that we should be consistent in our ideology. And so he was more of wanting to take a non-political approach. And his idea was to the black and gray. If you've ever heard the black and gray, he's talking about black and gray markets. And so the idea is that we should engage in the black and gray markets as best as possible. I'm not going to do the best job breaking down agorism in a short time for people. It's, for me, the two main turning points in my intellectual journey have been going from minarchist to anarchist and then from anarchist to agorist. And like I said, it's more the going into the whole like the black and gray markets, trying your best to disengage from the state in any way you can. And it's not a black and white thing. That's why you get the gray. Because a lot of people criticize agorists and go, oh, well, look at you. You're still paying taxes. Or you're still doing this. Or you're doing that. And it's like, well, the idea is to do as little as you can. So if you can, it's like taking baby steps with anything in life. Like if you want to start working out, you don't start, squatting 600 right off the bat. You work up to it. So you start your own garden, which is going to reduce having to get food from the grocery store, which is going to reduce sales tax, which is going to slowly starve the state to some extent, or you start using crypto, or, I have a business, for legal reasons is a joke, but it's off the books. I sell kitty cats. I breed Sphinx cats. And I'm not going to go into how much money I make because fuck the state. And I'm not telling them that. But, it's kind of stuff like that. It's like if you're using cash or crypto or whatever, and another thing he went into too is it's kind of, you got to balance the pros and cons. And it's also like it's kind of like, say you're a large business and you're breaking the rules a little bit and you're not paying taxes or whatever on something. You may want to look into it and see like, hey, what are going to be the consequences if I do this? If the consequences outweigh the benefit, then it's like, you don't do it. But now if it's a situation where it's like, hey, I can make X amount of money and while evading the state, and if they catch me, they're going to hit me with whatever fine. It's, like say I make $12 million and I get hit with a $1 million fine, it's like, obviously you came out on top. So it's kind of that. I mean, that's kind of a basic breakdown of it. I highly, highly, highly recommend, especially, I wouldn't recommend it for like the uninitiated, but if you're already like on that anarchist path I would suggest reading it. It's a good book. They're both short. Both of them are maybe a little bit longer than Anatomy of the State, but I highly recommend it. I really enjoyed them a lot. So yeah, that was my second pick. So
what is the gray market exactly? I'm familiar with the black market.
Yeah, well, he had the way he broke it down is there are white markets, there are gray markets, there's black markets, and there's red markets. So red markets would be like fucking bad. Like this is like, you know, hitmen, fucking child slavery,
like the really dark web.
Yeah, like shit like that. Like you don't fuck with that. It's like, so it's something that's immoral and illegal, essentially. So, and then you had the white, which is like completely up and up. You're paying your taxes. You're doing whatever. And obviously you got your black, which is, say it's something like weed. Say you're buying weed from a dealer. It's illegal. You know, like, I mean, I guess it depends on the state. But say you're in a state where it's still legal. It's completely illegal there. That's a black market. You're getting, it's illegal, but it's not immoral. I mean, maybe some people might think it is, but I mean, I would not think it's immoral. Most people wouldn't think it's immoral. They're not hurting anybody. They're just, you know, they're doing their thing, you know. So
it's like drinking alcohol.
Yeah. And then gray market would be kind of something in between. Like what I do with my cat business would be kind of gray market. It's like wishy-washy. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of in between.
It's like I'm going to avoid the taxes however I can.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it's not illegal. If the state ever caught me doing it, I mean, technically, I mean, obviously legal reasons joke, but technically somewhat it's kind of illegal, but like good luck catching me, fucker. Like, you know what I mean? But it's not illegal to sell cats. It's an in-between state kind of deal. Or a good example would be farmers markets. Farmers markets are technically gray market. Because let's be real, those guys are not like, you know, when they make that cash, they aren't reporting to the IRS.
No, well, I mean, that's, you know, like, again, for legal reasons, this is a joke, but let's say I was a charter captain and I got paid cash. Gray market, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you'd be an idiot to
report
it. It's illegal, though, technically. But no one's ever doing anything about it, so. But there's shades of gray, and that's kind of the whole idea. You can have a dark gray, you can have a light gray. It's like if someone pays me $10 for something I do, and I don't report that $10 to the IRS, technically speaking, it's illegal, but it's like it's so petty that it's not really a thing. You know what I mean? Like yeah. So that was kind of the idea of the gray. So because like I could straight up tell an IRS agent that I made $10 off somebody and didn't report it, and they'd be like, okay, you know. So yeah. Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and move on to yours. What's your third pick?
The next one is not a book. It is actually an article, and it is by this. I don't know what I would call him. Foreign policy philosopher, or you know, a human nature philosopher, I guess you can say, but it is by a guy named Walter Russell Mead, and it is titled The Jacksonian Tradition. It's a really interesting piece that actually another author put me onto, because it really discusses specifically the American like psyche, like how we think and how you have different groups within America, different, he calls them tribes, you know, and how it relates, why specifically people in other countries are so confused by our foreign policy. And it kind of goes into a lot more detail than that. The basics of it is he has 4 tribes, and they're basically boiled down to 4 presidents, and that's what he names them after. Is one is the Wilsonian, one is the Hamiltonian, the Jeffersonian, and then the Jacksonian. And he basically says that these 4 different tribes kind of encapsulate most of America. He goes into a lot more detail, but they all kind of do different things. If I remember right, it's the Wilsonian is the tribe that is concerned with like outreaches, helping other nations, doing nation building, things like that. The Hamiltonian is like with commerce, you know, economics, that type of stuff. They want to use the power of, you know, of us as a country to go out and to be able to make us wealthier and to make connections and do all those things. The Jeffersonian, can you take a guess which one he is?
Yeah, I could probably take a guess, but I'll let you go ahead and explain it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Libertarians, basically. So, and they're just liberty at, everything. That is what their kind of goal is right there. And then the last one is the Jacksonian, and their big deal is America comes before anyone else. It's really interesting just reading it because it offers you. I've always been interested in human nature for whatever reason, and I think that's why I'm read so much, because literature, especially fiction, offers you a lot of insights into human nature. That sounds odd because it's fiction, but it's very true. You start understanding why people act the way they do because you're able to get inside of the authors or these characters' heads. You start understanding what motivates people, especially if it's well-written books, because people always act in a maybe not logical manner from the outside, but to them it is illogical. It is logical, I mean. So reading this, it offers a good insight into human nature, specifically in regards to Americans. And as an American, that always interests me. So it's cool. Not really something what was expecting to kind of make me understand and make me think more often about like how we as Americans act and why we act the way we do and all these influences we've had. But whenever you read it, there are some things that I'm like, why do we do these things? And then you realize like, oh, that's why, because these are our motivating factors. So, and that it was Walter Russell Mead, The Jacksonian Tradition. So
yeah, send me the link after this, and I'll put it in the video description because I'd like to read it myself, and I'll also give everybody a chance to read it. I may even just go ahead and include our link, our list in here or not. I don't know. I don't know if I want to do spoilers, but yeah.
Just a forewarning, the guy is like a boomer, like 100% a boomer. Like there's no getting around it. So if you ever look him up, you're just gonna be like, oh, this guy,
I mean, sometimes you can get interesting stuff out of stuff that you disagree with. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right, move on to the next one. For me, No Treason, Constitution of, I think it's Constitution No Authority is a subtitle or whatever, but it's just on there. No Treason, Lysander Spooner. I know this probably would be one. This would be one I'd like you to read and just give me your thoughts. I don't know if you've ever read Lysander Spooner, because you may actually find yourself kind of grieving to some extent. Because I mean, I would assume he actually kind of takes the legal and like the constitutional arguments to dispute the Constitution to some extent. He kind of like, at one point he makes an argument how like, because this is kind of like, he was an anarchist during the Civil War times, and he was actually, God, what's the word I'm looking for? We were anti-slavery. I'm on a brain fart right now. What's it called? Abolitionist. He was an abolitionist. Yeah. He was an abolitionist anarchist who was against the Civil War. So like he which like I know a lot of people, it blows their mind. He had a whole argument where his reasoning was that like for economic reasons, for one, he thought it was immoral that we would stop someone from leaving the Union, because he even brought up constitutional arguments. But then he was of the mind that, even from a practical standpoint, that he actually thought slavery would die quicker with the South seceded from the Union, because then for economic reasons they would just have to escape to the North, and then it would be kind of this like, it just wouldn't be economically viable for them to do slavery anymore, essentially. So he actually thought that they would cause less violence, and it would end it quicker, like end with less bloodshed. So,
well, I mean,
yeah,
I don't know if that was the most costly war we've ever been in. So I don't think it could possibly end with more bloodshed.
Right.
So
yeah.
He might have something there.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, I've read basically all of Lysander Spooner's work. I love Spooner. He's great. But like the point of this book is, most people know he's well known for the quote of, whether the Constitution be one thing or another, it's either been powerless to prevent I mean, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, prevent the state of things as it is, or it allowed it kind of deal. I mean, I messed up. The first half I got completely right. The second half was a little off. But point was being either like, and he was kind of referring to the whole Civil War and how like it should have never happened constitutionally speaking, and anyone who knows anything about Lincoln is he kind of crossed a lot of lines going down that road. But yeah, and then also he, like I said, he did kind of bring up from a constitutional standpoint how like the South should have been able to break it off, and he also went into a lot how the Constitution wasn't a binding contract, and it's especially if you're a constitutionalist, I'd highly recommend reading it, because like I went through a period where even as an anarchist, you kind of still venerate the Constitution, and then I think reading this, you kind of start to break away that superstition essentially that you have with it. And I know it's hard for a lot of people. I mean, I know you probably completely disagree. I highly suggest you read it. Because he kind of breaks down how it was a contract between a handful of people, and how is this supposed to bind across generations. You know, and I guarantee you'd probably say that they messed up and that they should have, like, you know, I forget what I'm not as up to date, but they were supposed to continually ratify or whatever, or they were supposed to meet for conventions or whatever. I forget I think you know what I'm getting at, but they were supposed to regularly meet up, but a lot of things fell through.
They were supposed to do a lot of things.
So, and that's kind of the whole point, you know, to some extent. You know, it's like, you know, the path to hell is laid with the best intentions, you know. But so I really just read it. I think you'd actually like it a lot.
I'll check it out.
What I do with you, and it's I don't know. He was a very interesting mind. I've read like all his works, and he was a very, very interesting guy. And it's like he was extremely anti-slavery. Like I'm pretty sure he was rumored to have like completely like financially supported armed revolutions of slaves and like just craziness. He also like at one point created a competitor for the post office, and then the U.S. government essentially put him out of business through legal means, because he was basically like, fuck these guys. He's a very interesting historical figure. I highly suggest reading up on him. He's a BAMF. Like, that's all I can say. Yeah, I definitely suggest reading it.
I'll check him out.
Yeah,
and that's mainly because you know, we obviously have the same goals of putting the post office out of business. So. But
so you want to go ahead and I think we were gonna. Wait, you still got to do your third? No, you already did 3. I've done 3.
All right,
let's go ahead and do our other 2. I thought we were gonna be a little bit longer. I was worried we were gonna hit all 5, but let's keep going.
No, I got it. I'm ready.
Yeah.
My number 4 is actually something I read recently, and surprisingly, it was written by Mao Zedong, the Mao. You know, and it is on guerrilla warfare. And specifically, you know, it goes into a lot of detail on like how they fought the Japanese during World War II. But it really, the key parts that I really looked at was he talked about specifically his revolutionaries within that, and like how basically every guerrilla war, you know, every soldier is not just a soldier, they're a propagandist. And, you know, he talks about all this, and it just kind of offered a lot of insight into, again, human nature and like culture and all that, and how you can affect these major things. And really, it offered insight into revolutionaries. And I started researching that more, specifically revolutionaries, going all the way even back to the Enlightenment, you know, in France and all that, where they had Robespierre, you know, and they were cutting people's heads off and all that. And it just offered such an in-depth view of how their mind, it's honestly kind of crazy how his mind worked and how a revolutionary's mind worked. Just like, all we care about is the revolution. That's it. And I mean, it was really insightful.
Yeah, guerrilla warfare will bring an empire to its knees.
Well, it's one of those things that, like, you know, not even necessarily the like how he's using like his troops, but like how he's changing people's minds and influencing the citizens. And he discusses that in the book. And I was like, man, that's honestly crazy, because you look at every revolution and it's the same playbook every time.
Even aside from revolution, take a look at the Middle East, and you're saying about the ideology and how it affects, when it comes to guerrilla warfare. Like, look at, like, say we go drone bomb some area that say there is a target, say there's even a handful of targets, and say you kill, 5, like major terrorists, but say on the same hand you kill a handful of innocents, which is that happens all the time. Now, what's going to happen? You just created more
bombing weddings.
Yeah. So
bombing weddings.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Like, to get one guy. But it's crazy whenever you start reading that and you start seeing connections within other revolutions, just with all these things in history, and you're like, oh, that makes sense now. It's clicking all of a sudden. So, but yeah, that's the next one. It's an interesting book on guerrilla warfare. It's by the Mao. So, and really, I started reading it just as a know your enemy, and kind of to familiarize myself with the concepts of guerrilla warfare a little more. So, but
yeah,
it's good.
Send me. I think I'm going to go ahead and include these all in the video description, because for one, I want something for me to be able to go back to and look. Because actually, that does interest me. So that in the article, obviously. So we'll put that in there so people can refer back to, so if they decide they want to read this material later. So yeah. So that was your 4th pick.
All right, I'll send it.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and go to my 4th pick. This will be my first fiction. V for Vendetta, baby. A lot of people don't realize the movie was a comic, and a lot of people may criticize it because Alan Moore he's a communist. I mean, he would straight up say he's an ancom. You read this book, and it does go a lot into the philosophy of communism. Well, no, actually, I misspoke. It goes more into the philosophy of anarchism, and there's like hints of you can catch hints of the communism in there, but from like an ancom perspective. But for the most part, it's one of those things, and yeah, I mean, it definitely goes into how it goes a lot into the philosophy in the book, and how how governments work, and how and they also go into kind of the revolutionary thing a lot too, which I mean I'm not really on board with the whole revolution thing anymore. I used to be back in the day, but it's definitely very interesting, the life of V, and it goes more deep into the philosophy in the book than it goes in the movie. I actually like both the movie and the book equally, but for different reasons. The book goes more deeper into the philosophy of V and all that stuff going on, and how he thinks like anarchy works and stuff like that, and how revolution works. But then the great thing I like about the movie is because the book, for us Americans, it's hard to identify, because if I remember correctly, I think it's set in like the 70s or the 80s, and it's set in like Britain or it's set in like England. So, but the movie it's still set in England, but it definitely has feelings of like the 9/11 era, and it kind of plays off those notes. And especially now in the age of COVID, that shit fucks with you, because in V for Vendetta, it's like it makes you wonder if Alan Moore was a prophet, because in V for Vendetta, the setting is America is completely fucked and destroyed, and they like fuck themselves over in the aftermath of a plague, and England has gone full on authoritarian in measures to protect against some plague, and it's like that's fucking creepy, dog.
Especially if I don't know if you saw this, but like in Denmark, they're putting in the appeals, like in laws, to legislate to where they can forcibly make you take the vaccine.
I mean, that's really, I'm not even that surprised, to be honest. I'm not even going to be surprised when it comes to us, to be honest.
But,
I
think V for Vendetta.
Huh?
Sorry, on the 5th of November, and I watched it, and I was like, this is uncanny how similar this sounds. So I can't even imagine if the book has more detail. So.
Yeah, I mean, the book, like I said, I don't know if rereading the book now would be as creepy, because like I said, it doesn't, the thing the book lacks is relatability. Because like I said, it's set in like the 80s, and it might, I think, almost has like an even older feel to it. And I don't know, almost kind of has weird like undertones of like classical like type. I mean, it's because it's V, you know, but they kind of play that up more. So it's a little less relatable, but for like, if you want to go deep into the psyche or the philosophy of V, or like just the ideas of everything going on, it's cooler. But for relatability, I don't think it has it as much. Whereas the movie, that's where the movie went right, where they kind of made it, they definitely played off. And like, I mean, it kind of weirdly worked out now for the current situation. Obviously, they didn't intend it to, but it worked well for like the 9/11 tones when it came out, because it was in the 9/11 era.
Yeah.
Like post 9/11 and like the whole Patriot Act and all that shit. But like it weirdly kind of plays a lot to the COVID stuff now. I don't know if the book would as much. I mean, it's still in the book, it's the same setting, but I don't know if it would be as creepy in that because I watched the book at the heat of all the COVID, or watched the movie at the heat of all the COVID stuff, and that shit was it freaked me out. I watched with my wife, and she'd never watched, and she's like, "Turn the shit off! I can't watch this."
I mean, I would say it almost makes it more creepier than, because whenever you look at, you know, the post 9/11 era with the Patriot Act and all that. Of course, I was pretty young then, but now with all the technology, I mean, people are putting the NSA in their house with Alexa. You know, like I know the government's listening in on it. So,
yeah. Have you read the book or no?
I have not read the book. So
I suggest it's good.
I need to.
Yeah, it's
so.
Good.
Is it just it's a graphic comic or what?
Yeah, it's like completely
a graphic novel.
Oh, actually, never mind. I thought it was black and white, but it's not. It's got color, but it has that like black and white feel to it. It's like more of a noir type feel to it. Yeah, but even though it does have color, but the way they do the art, it has that more like noir type feel to it. Even though it's not set in that time frame, it kind of gives it that feeling. You know, I guess noir was the word I was looking for earlier. It was almost like that like 50s kind of vibe.
If we could bring that period back, that would be pretty cool. They dressed cool. They had cool. They used Thompson 45s. You know.
Yeah. Get friggin'.
We called people dames. Called ladies dames.
All right. Yeah, I'd suggest it. It's a good book. Yeah.
So the next one is actually my fifth one was a hard one because I have a lot of authors, but I would say this book it's a guy named Larry Correia, and it's a series, Monster Hunter International, and it's straight like fantasy, but it's like urban not urban fantasy. They hunt monsters, but it literally starts off with and this is honestly a guilty pleasure book, but some of the tones, especially whenever you start reading some of the stuff, which I've shared some of the author stuff on Facebook, is, you know, he's super libertarian, he's super, you know, about all of these principles, and that's displayed in the book. Like, these people are there hunting monsters, and the government pays them money, like, for bounties basically on these monsters, and it's vampires and werewolves. But it starts off with the guys like, on my last night of work, I got to live the American dream, and I shoved my boss out of a 30-second store window. So it was just really funny because all of this is going on in this, but it's still like, these are normal guys fighting monsters. They're getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's like, oh, well, what are you doing? Well, I'm buying this cool new gun. So they've got all kinds of cool stuff. It's also because the guy is really into shooting. He actually owned a gun shop. He was an accountant and all that. And he trained for a while. So it's very accurate in regards to guns and all that. It's just kind of a guilty pleasure read. I wouldn't say it's necessarily affected my thinking a lot, but by reading that and then associating with the author, it definitely has. So, and then also the guys in here hate the government. So it's really funny.
I was just thinking while you were talking, a lot of these books you're bringing up are books I'd love to read. And I don't know if maybe we should I'm a really slow reader, so it'd probably take me forever. But I think one of two things we should do. One, either reconvene once both of us have read each other's books from our book list. And obviously, I think there was a couple of ours that we both read already, like obviously Lord of the Rings. And then have a discussion. Yeah. Or if you do end up having a show, then we do that. Those could be episodes where we cover, instead of going over all of them, say we do, oh, you finally read this book? Oh, let's talk about it. Because I do think that'd be fun to kind of see other people's perspective, especially when we kind of come from different perspectives. Yeah. Because obviously you're more, you're more fiction, I'm more nonfiction, you're more minarchist, I'm more anarchist. So I think it'd be interesting getting each other to read each other's books. So.
For sure. And I've tried to start delving into more nonfiction. Obviously, fiction will always be my bread and butter just because I love it. I entertain it. And a lot of times that's stress relief for me. But you can still learn an amazing amount from fiction. I am a writer, so I know whenever I research something for a book, if you're a good writer, you research a lot. I went all into Charlemagne's history, his life, his paladins, his 12 paladins that he had, just to write short stories. So I know that a lot of these guys, another author, John Ringo, he's got some scientific books that he writes that they're science fiction, but he writes them with a physicist. So delving into those two different worlds, especially, I'm really interested in that Treason by Spooner that you mentioned, and the other one about the gray markets. That sounds interesting to me because I enjoy human nature and black market, gray markets, all that's part of that.
Yeah, so. I think you'll dig all that. All right, well, I'll go ahead and get in my last one. I actually changed it while we were doing this because I was just thinking about it, and I was like, because we talked about agorism, but I'll go ahead and tell you what it was going to be, and I won't really delve into it. I'll put this in the list as an honorable mention because I do think people should read it. The one I was going to do was Most Dangerous Superstition by Larken Rose, where he goes into how the belief in government is like religion, and he kind of makes that analogy. He goes really deep into it, and I think there's a lot to it. And but what I ended up changing it to is I completely forgot, and while we were talking about it, it made me think of it. It was an audiobook. So I guess in a sense, it doesn't count. It does have an actual physical book, but the audiobook is phenomenal. And I listened to the audiobook, never read the book, but the audiobook is probably one of the best performed audiobooks I've ever heard. And it was Alongside Night by Neil Schulman, which what it is essentially a fictionalized version of agorism. It's essentially the best way I've heard it described is kind of like Atlas Shrugged, but for agorism. Because Atlas Shrugged was his way of, or her way of expressing objectivism and her philosophy through fiction. And Neil Schulman was basically almost a disciple of Sam Konkin, who was the one who developed agorism. And that was his way of expressing agorism through fiction. And it was a really good book. I'd highly suggest it.
Well, especially, which I think that's something that we need to look into is in regards to fiction. Is I forgot who it was, but they quoted it might have been C.S. Lewis. Was that you put your not that you put your beliefs, but you teach lessons with fiction, and that is kind of like the sugar you add to a bitter pill, and it makes it to where the more people read this, even though it's fiction, they'll start realizing there are truths in fiction. So an agorist fiction book is interesting because I think that is we talk about culture and spreading a culture of liberty. That I think is an interesting way. That's how you start not taking over, but you start spreading that through use of media, fiction, all these things that people will consume because they want to be entertained, and then you'll spark something in them. So
yeah, it's really interesting. I wasn't completely prepared to switch this, but from what I remember, the setting of the story is it's from the perspective of, I don't know, he must be like a senior or junior in high school. So he's like a kind of an older teenager boy, and his dad is a economist, and he's like essentially a Milton Friedman type. So he's kind of that more, he's libertarian, but more on the statist minarchist kind of side-ish. So, but they are in the midst of an economic collapse. Is basically what's happening. It's very reminiscent of what's going on in the United States, where we are, printing money.
I was fixing to say that.
Yeah, and the collapse happens, and it kind of happens all at once, and it's more about him and his family trying to escape, and then it's along the way he kind of finds these black and gray markets areas where he kind of it's almost like it's what Konkin in his books refers to as the agora, which is like the black markets, and on the idea of how they break away from the state. And as time goes on, they kind of create their own little free market areas, essentially, away from the state. And it's kind of going into how those blend, and he kind of uses them to escape from this essentially dying animal that is the state, and he kind of uses them for those purposes. And it kind of essentially one concept that Konkin goes into in his book is the agora revolution, and that it's a revolution. There's going to, in his idea, there's going to be this one penultimate moment where the state does kind of die. He does always go into there how there'll always be like pockets of statism and pockets of state, but he goes into how there will be like a moment where it kind of is on its deathbed, or has that peak, and that I don't know, the crescendo kind of deal, and he kind of goes into that, but it's not the agoric revolution to him is not the typical revolution where it's we overthrow the government and institute a new one. It's the black markets suffocate the government, and they do try to fight it, and they end up failing at the end, and it's just kind of well,
agorism is all about nonviolent revolution.
Yep, and that's kind of what it is
through economic policy.
Yep. Yes.
Yeah.
So, and it's kind of an illustration of that.
That's different. That's way different than what I was discussing earlier. So for sure. Way different. Because Robespierre is not a nonviolent revolutionist.
No.
So, and Mao certainly wasn't. So,
definitely not.
But no. And what was that called again?
Alongside Night by Neil Schulman. Like I said, I'm going to include all these. I'm going to include both our lists in the video description, because I want to have something referred to go back to read these, because I want to read your list as well. I would highly suggest you in the audiobook, because the audiobook was phenomenal. But yeah, it's a really good book. I do think you did bring up how it's important to go through fiction. I never read Atlas Shrugged, but I read The Fountainhead, and I didn't fucking like it. I read the whole thing. It's a long-ass book. And I do think there's a balancing act when you use fiction to express ideas. I do think you need to make it enjoyable and not. It's like a balancing act. It's kind of like Alan Moore, how I mentioned. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of Alan Moore, and V for Vendetta is a little bit of an outlier, but he is, in a lot of his other works, you can definitely tell that he's a communist and that he has those kind of ideas. He's an anarcho-communist, but I can read one of his books, like in Swamp Thing, and it can be something I completely disagree with, but I still enjoy it because it's well done, and it's you relate to the characters.
If someone writes well, you should have that. I mean, an example, and I almost, this was honorable mention. This was another book I almost didn't make the list, but it was close. It's it's a dark fantasy series by this guy named Mark Lawrence, and literally, the first book, I almost quit reading it in the prologue because it was just I can't read this character. He's a terrible person. Literally, it opens with him, pillaging a village, and he's doing everything that goes along with pillaging a village. And it's the main character. And then by the end of this trilogy, I was like, oh my God, this is about to happen. You can't do that to that character. He's my favorite character.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show you that even though you have somebody, which the main premise of that story was about, it was character development and how he's changed over time, how he went from this terrible, cruel person to someone, that was I wouldn't necessarily say good, but he went from a villain to an anti-hero, I guess you can say.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of what it covers. So even though I hated this, the book, the writing, all that was so good. It was like, oh, this is interesting. So you definitely have to have that in a fiction book, because if it's not interesting, it's not interesting. Also, people have different tastes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
that is part of it. So
yeah, I also think it's a matter of, I really think you need to strike a balance of not beating your audience over the head with your point. And I think sometimes they do that.
With it.
Yeah. But a lot of your characters do. Like they said, Alan Moore, I love him, and I completely disagree with a lot of his ideology. And I've read books where I completely disagree with the whole premise, but he's not beating you. So, sorry, you're going to say something?
Well, I mean, that's a lot of the reason why a lot of modern movies and stuff are failing, right? Because they're everybody's making it with an agenda that's other than just telling a good story, which you can put a message in there. That's fine. But the issue is, it's like they're, the scene I think of is from Endgame. Spoilers. Though everybody should have seen it by now. If you haven't, you're wrong. But the scene I think of is like that scene where you have all the feminist women just suddenly appear on the battlefield at the same place, like after they were spread out, and it's like, okay, that completely threw me out of this moment.
Yeah,
it's a great movie, but that part right there was just like you couldn't do that a better way, like,
hey, we have vaginas.
So, exactly. It was like, okay, well, like, I'm gonna cringe on this part, but let's get it over with and get back to the story.
Yeah, yeah, they can. Yeah, I remember that part, and I was like, what the fuck? But like, I love that movie still.
That's beating your audience over the head.
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
and that was, just,
I can even agree with the concept. If you're beating me over the head with it, I'm gonna be like, why?
No, I don't want to. Why do you keep talking about capitalism? I'm trying to read something.
Yeah, I agree.
Fun. I'm trying to read something fun. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we're at a good spot to go ahead and kill it. I don't think you have any plugs, but do you have anything you want to plug while we're here?
I mean, I'm sure if later on, whenever I do plan on eventually starting something, even if it's just a blog. So I'm sure if you would like later on, you can do that, but not yet. So,
like I said, sorry, go ahead.
I do have a book, a short story on Amazon. It's called The Soldier's Hope. So
yeah, give that to me. Send me the link or whatever, and I'll drop in the video description for people to check out. Yeah, I mean, this is probably something we can talk about off air, but whatever, we'll do it right here. If you do decide you want to like be part of the the Liberty Movement YouTube channel or whatever, the great thing about if we end up having a myriad of hosts is there's no like giant commitment. It's kind of like if you only want to create one bit of one thing a month of content or whatever, it's like, who cares? It gets peppered in. There's no like, what I mean? Yeah. It's like, especially the more people get involved, the less of a weight there is on people's shoulders to feel like they need to contribute. You know what I mean?
Like, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, definitely.
But anyways, yeah, I'll go ahead and go in my plugs real quick, and then we'll go ahead and kill it. So keep in mind, we got the Facebook group, obviously, the Liberty Movement. If you aren't in there, you're fucking up. We also got the MeWe now. We also are on Library right now, LBRY, whatever the hell they call it. We're still working on getting that up and running completely. Yeah, we got the email, thelibertymovementglobal@gmail.com. And like I've said, every video, we're trying to work on getting an email list together. So you can either email me or us at that email, or if you're in the MeWe group or if you're in the Facebook group, shoot us a message and let us know your email, because we're trying to get together an email list because we want to do like a newsletter or like a website at some point. And so we're trying to assemble emails for that, because we've especially in this with all the election and stuff, Facebook has shown itself to be super unreliable. I'm still zucked. I'm still zucked right now. I can't interact with complex entities because God forbid I get some sort of message out. And I'm not even really a political individual. They're like, yep, no, I don't know what I did. I'm actually not much of a shit poster anymore. So it's not even that. Like that used to be my thing. It's just like being a shit poster. But now I'm more about, you know, trying to affect change. But yeah, anyways, and then we also got the merch. Like I said before, that doesn't necessarily go to Liberty Movement, but that goes to one of the admins. And he, you know, I mean, whatever, it's fun merch. We're all capitalists here, you know, hook up the homie. You know, you've seen me sipping on this drink. I've shown some of the shirts and stuff. This is one of the merch you can get from it with our logo on it. Yeah. What else I got? I think I got something else. And yeah, that's it. Yeah, like, share, subscribe, comment, do all that stuff. Super helps out. Yeah, definitely. Please, please, please. If you aren't subscribed, subscribe. I'm not one to like beg or anything, and I'm not really begging. But apparently, Library will only auto update your shit if you have 100 subscribers or more. And so now it's like really annoying, and we're at like under 100 subscribers where we have to like manually update the library and also the YouTube. So it'd be cool if they just synced up. So if you could get us to 100 subscribers, that'd be cool. We're kind of lazy and we don't want to have to mess with that. Yeah, with that, you know, it's been great having you on, Andrew. I hope to see more from you soon. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed all this.
Yeah, I had fun. This is good. But yeah, with that, go ahead. We're done. Deuces. See ya.
All right, later, Jose.
All right, see you, man.